Hey there guys and girls, Mantis here and welcome back to another video. So today it's time to do a little bit of a deep dive on blacksmithing. One of the last ones, we covered jewel crafting, we've covered inscription, now it's blacksmith's turn, simply because blacksmith has a really nice synergy with jewel crafting, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. So let's dive straight in, let's not mess about. First and foremost though, what I should say is that this video is slightly going to be a slightly longer video than what you're probably used to on this channel. I like to keep my videos quite short and concise, but of course we're doing a deep dive, so we need to talk about everything we possibly can about blacksmithing in Shadowlands. Now what that does mean is you may want a TLDR version, but luckily I have you covered for that. I'll leave a link, top link in the description down below will be to just the quick look I did of blacksmithing a little while ago. The 99% of the content in that video is still entirely relevant, so if you just want a quick overview, make sure you check that one out. Pause this video, head over there, make sure to remember to give this video at least a like before you do though. As it'd be very much appreciative. But this is going to cover pretty much everything I can put together in one video, so you guys know exactly what you're doing with blacksmithing. So firstly, let's not mess about. Let's look at the materials you're going to use as a blacksmith. If I'm looking down here, it's because that's where my notes are, and for a video of this length I need at least some notes. Materials wise, we're going to be using a lot of ore. Yes, blacksmiths always need those materials to craft with, and this expansion is no different. So let's take a look. Lacerite ore is going to be your bread and butter for the majority of your crafts. Virtually everything you're going to make is going to use lacerite ore in some fashion, but this is fine. Lacerite ore is the default ore that is mineable in every single, or all of the 4 zones, should I say, of Shadowlands, whether it be Bastion, Ardenweald, Maldraxxus, or Revendreth. You're going to be able to pick up a lot of lacerite ore if you're a miner, and good thing, because blacksmiths are going to need it by the bucket load. They occasionally are going to need some of the rare version of the ore, which is called a lithium ore. This, if you're a miner, you will know that is considerably rarer than what lacerite will be. But luckily, a blacksmith doesn't actually require a huge amount of this until we get to crafting the base legendary items. Don't worry if you're not sure what the base legendary items are yet or how you go about getting them. We're going to cover that soon as well. You are going to need some of all of the ores. That you may know that mining has a zone specific ore. Each zone in Shadowlands has their own one. For example, Sinvir ore is only found in Revendreth, Solinum ore is only found in Bastion, Oxane ore is only found in Maldraxxus, and Phaedrum ore is only found in Ardenweald. You do need some of all of it though, so be prepared to have to spend that little bit of extra gold on the auction house sometimes to get a collection of all of the ores. Unfortunately, it's not like jewel crafting where we can just sort of get a whole bunch of one ore and prospect it all. We do need to spread the materials quite in an even fashion. That's, I guess, what we should say. There are a couple of other materials you're going to need in some quantities: porous stone and shaded stone. These are both found from mining. So actually you can probably tell straight away, if you want to be somewhat self-sufficient, choose mining to go along with blacksmithing is pretty good choice, unless of course you happen to have a druid that is both herbalism and mining already on another character. That is the best combo by far. But yes, porous stone and or equally shaded stone, you're going to need these for crafting some items. You can see this one just here, one of the weapon mods. It uses realistically actually quite small quantities of shaded stone, but this is still going to be quite valuable on the auction house early days. And then the last material we're going to use as a blacksmith that you should definitely be aware of is luminous flux. Be aware of goblins trying to sell this on the auction house for a huge profit. Luminous flux, it does say it in the tooltip, but it still catches some people out every expansion. Luminous flux is just a vendor item. When you get yourself into Oribos, you'll come over to the blacksmith trainer. He's right here. And just a few doors down, you've got a trade supply vendor where you can buy the luminous flux from. Don't feel the need to buy this off the auction house. There's a good chance they'll be selling it for way more than it's worth from the vendor. It's 5 gold a piece for those of you that are interested. So materials wise, blacksmithing's pretty basic. You need a load of ore, and then you're going to craft a bunch of armor. Pretty straightforward. Let's continue. So let's look at the actual leveling of blacksmithing. You'll see I've managed to get skill 100 out of 100 on the beta. First thing I'll say about blacksmith leveling is it's pretty expensive, or at least it's going to be. Obviously, I can only speculate on the cost because this is still the beta. We don't know exactly how much each of these materials is going to go for. But in relation to some of the other professions I've leveled, which if you're interested is all of them, I'll leave links down below as well for the blacksmithing 1 to 100 leveling guide. On average, I'd say blacksmithing is going to cost you quite substantially more than it is to cost to level some of the other professions. I should show you ever so quickly the path that you need to take when it comes to leveling blacksmithing. I did this just a couple of days ago, so it's pretty up to date. Obviously, this is beta. There are still things that are subject to change, but for the most part, it's pretty much standard. As you can see, a whole bunch of luminous flux and lacerite ore. These are two materials you're going to use a lot of. You might be able to just see on the side here, lacerite ore, you need just over a stack of it in total. Shadowgast ingots is, I suppose, a material I should probably talk about. Shadowgast ingot is something you can buy off the auction house, but you as a blacksmith are able to make it yourself. Shadowgast ingots will be way more apparent to you in just a few moments when we start talking about the crafts themselves. But there's only a couple of stumbling blocks when it comes to leveling blacksmithing. This center portion here where you make shaded sharpening stones or shaded wade stones, trust me, all of these will make sense in a minute. It's at this point here where you can actually choose to craft these Shadowgast ingots yourself instead of purchasing them off the auction house. Now, that is a choice that's kind of up to you. You're going to have to do a little bit of research, see if the price of these Shadowgast ingots is more expensive than what it costs to buy the ore to craft them yourself. There's a little bit of choice. There's some options in here. If you guys want access to the Shadowlands cheat sheet, it is also linked in the description down below. It goes over a whole bunch of things like prospecting and milling and the cost for some of the legendary base items. So this is something well worth looking at. But yeah, leveling's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. It's not a difficult profession to level, but just be aware it is quite costly. But I guess you probably want to know what all of these items are that I keep quoting. So let's take a look at what we actually craft as a blacksmith. I'll go through them one by one, we'll talk about them in a little bit of detail, and I'll try my best to highlight any of the stumbling blocks. So, of course, we're a blacksmith. We make armour, it's what we do. We craft armour all day long. There is two different types of armour we can craft. Ceremonious armour, which is in essence what you would consider your levelling gear, your basic levelling gear. Even though the shoulders you can't use them till 57, the basic pieces of the gear you could start using from as little as 51, I think, or maybe even 50. So this is going to be your levelling gear, assuming you're a plate wearing class. If not, feel free to craft some of these up and sell them on the auction house. These are pretty cheap. I mean, you're not looking at more than, I think 12 is the maximum amount of lacerite ore you're ever going to need to craft one of these. And they do have the ability to be improved upon ever so slightly by using a crafter's mark. The crafter's mark 1 will increase the item level of these, or set the item level to 50. It will set the item level to 117 and the required level to 55. So some of these lower level pieces, if you want to replace them halfway through your leveling, you can throw in a crafter's mark there and recraft it, and you can maintain a good level of gear throughout your leveling. Or, like I said, for most goblins out there, you're just crafting this to sell. Whether you choose to use a crafter's mark to increase the item level, or in some cases if you use the novice crafter's mark to decrease the crafting level, that is entirely up to you. A solid strategy would be to craft the shoulders, which by default can't be used until 57, but to put a crafter's mark, a novice crafter's mark on them, so it brings their item level down, but it also means that level 50s can use them as well, if they're not coming into Shadowlands with some high gear in the first place. Secondly then, when we're talking about gear, there's the level 60 gear. Basic level 60 gear that you can craft is called Shadow Steel gear. There's a few bits of it that you pick up from the trainer whilst leveling. It does start to get a lot more expensive. This is starting to use these Shadowgast ingots, and it's also using the rare version of the ore, the Elysium ore, and in a regular basis, quite a lot of luminous flux. You may notice there's a couple of extra options. With this, you can actually specify what secondary stats appear on the gear. So you see if I hover over the tooltip for this, for example, Shadow Steel Greaves, bind on equip, item level 151, and it's going to give you plus 40 of 2 random stats. Now if you just craft this by itself, the game will randomly pick those stats for you. But if you're looking to min-max either your gear or min-max gear that you want to sell on the auction house, you can specify which secondary stats you want to appear on this gear. It's going to cost you a missive. Missives, if you're unaware, are crafted by scribes and basically just are the optional reagent. These are also used in base legendary items, which we'll get to in a little minute. But be aware that these missives, early days, are going to be very expensive. So if you're just crafting gear to sell it on the auction house, you're going to have to question to yourself, is it really worth it? But you'll have to do some maths yourself when the game actually goes live. My personal opinion is you probably won't, but for your own personal gear, you might want to specify it. So we've covered the leveling gear, we've covered the level 60 gear. Oh, should be noted that 2 pieces of the level 60 gear are actually locked behind reputations. Luckily though, it's only honoured. You can get the shoulders and you can get the helm when you're honoured with either the Ascended, which is the main faction in Bastion, or the Undying Army, which is the main faction in Moldraxxus. So if you happen to choose the Necrolords as your Covenant, or the Kyrian as your Covenant, you're probably going to get access to one of these very, very quickly. The other one, with it only being honoured, can probably be picked up in a couple of days just doing some worm quests. It's not going to take you too long at all. The other main thing that blacksmiths always get their hands on is, of course, the weapons. And this is going to be a reasonably, I would say, a pretty good goal maker for blacksmiths. Even though you can only boost the item level to a maximum of 117 and the required level to 55. That's as high as these will go. The reason these are going to be pretty popular though is through leveling on the beta and going through the main questing zones. The one thing that you're always lacking is a good weapon. And the likelihood is that you may turn to the auction house a few times during your leveling process to try and pick up something a little bit better than the trash that you're carrying. And the ceremonious weapons are going to be there specifically for that purpose. They're pretty cheap. They're going to be relatively quick sellers for you. They're good things to keep an eye on. One thing to note is things like the ceremonious blade, for example. It's got a vendor sell price of 70 gold. Well, while it's only taking 4 pieces of ore to craft it and 15 gold of vendor materials. So quick maths, take 15 away from 70, you've got 55. That's meaning each lacerite ore is almost guaranteed to be at least like 10 to 12 gold. These values seem low, if I'm honest. So when you look at this when the game goes live, if these values are slightly higher, don't be too surprised. But obviously I can't see into the future. So, but yes, the weapons are going to be good. Craft a whole bunch of these, get them on the auction house. They're going to sell pretty nicely. The last thing before we get to the really juicy bit for blacksmithing, we'll talk about the weapon mods for a moment. Yes, weapon mods are back in the game. These have not made an appearance for quite a while, I believe. It's been a good few expansions before we've had something like this, but Shadowlands is more so a expansion of consumables. So now we have the ability to increase the attack power of either your blunt weapons or your sharp weapons, depending on whether you use a sword or a mace or whatever the case may be. It's a nice, simple, just flat attack power. It lasts for an hour. You're likely to sell these in pretty large quantities, but if I'm honest, they're going to be very, very cheap. Both the shaded stone and the porous stone, these are realistically one of the only things that these materials are used for in the game. So the likelihood is that the materials themselves are likely to be pretty cheap, meaning the actual consumable is going to end up being pretty cheap. But everybody that's raiding, everybody that's doing Mythic Plus on any sort of competitive basis is going to want to make sure that they have a stack of these in their bags for constant use. They only last an hour. At this point, I'm not sure whether they persist through death. I've not tested, but I'm sure somebody will let you know in the comments if you're interested on that one. But the weapon mods are kind of cool. They're pretty cheap. Craft up them in large quantities. Keep 100 or so of them on the auction house at all times, and you'll be surprised just how many of these will probably sell on a regular basis. But alright, we've talked a lot about the stuff that most people want to hear about. Let's talk about the big, juicy juicy section of blacksmithing, which is of course the base legendary items. This is a hot topic right now. Base legendary items are more and more people are realizing very quickly that these are going to be quite costly. Not only costly for the people that are crafting them, but of course the people that are acquiring them. A few days ago I posted a video talking about the base legendaries in a little bit more detail in relation to the soul ash, which is one of the materials you need to actually craft your end legendary piece. But the base legendary items are going to be a staple for blacksmith, not just at the beginning of the expansion, but hopefully for the entirety of it. So investing some time in getting these leveled up and ranked up is going to be really, really valuable to you. But let's take a look at them in a little bit more detail and find out exactly what we need. So, Shadowgast ingot. This is a good time for me to talk about this material. Shadowgast ingot is going to be required in very large quantities by blacksmiths. I did mention earlier that you can craft it yourself. You can take one of each of the zone specific ores and you can add some vendor materials to it, 20 gold's worth of vendor materials, and that will allow you to craft 2 Shadowgast ingots. Now of course you can keep these yourselves, you can use them for yourself, or you can sell them on the auction house. So there is a little bit of potential there to sell any surplus that you have and try and make a profit on those, even if you don't choose to craft items with them yourself. So yes, you've got the option to craft your Shadowgast ingots. That's why you need a whole bunch of the ore. Then you're going to be pumping all of that straight into the Shadowgast arm guards, breastplates, gauntlets, greaves, helms, pauldrons, sabatons, and waistguards. Right, the best place to start with these is they're going to require a lot of materials, and if you actually want to get ahead of the game and work out exactly how much this is likely to cost you, let me see if I can squeeze this all on screen to make it simple. The base legendary items, you have to craft 10 of a single piece of one of these to be able to upgrade it to rank 2. There are 4 ranks of base legendary item for blacksmiths. You have to craft 10 rank 1s to unlock rank 2. You have to craft an additional 5 rank 2s to unlock rank 3, and then you have to craft 5 rank 3 pieces to unlock rank 4. Now every time you increase the rank, the item level of the gear itself is going to increase. So this is going to be super valuable for people wanting to get the strongest legendary they possibly can. Now there is some element of time gating to this, so I do recommend you watch my video at some point on the base legendary items, so that you get an understanding of exactly how and when they're going to be useful to people. But in fundamental base terms, it's going to be quite expensive. So use my Shadowlands cheat sheet, plug in your server values for the materials on these, and this sheet will do the rest of the work for you. So Shadowgast ingots are going to be pretty costly in total. I should note the enchanted Elythium bars these are actually crafted by an enchanter. The additional thing to note is that enchanters can only craft these after they've gained a certain reputation. This is a very weird situation for a blacksmith to be in, the fact that they are entirely dependent on another profession to be able to craft these. This is why if you're a blacksmith, there is a good chance that you may want to also take enchanting, just so that you can do the hard work for that. Then you can be somewhat self-sufficient. You buy your ore off the auction house, but then the actual materials that you need to craft, even the base legendary items, you can craft them all yourself. That is my sort of top tip, I suppose. Look at being potentially either a miner to get the materials, or get very friendly with an enchanter so that you can get a good supply of these enchanted Elythium bars. Yeah, there's not much else to say about the base legendary items. If you've got questions on these, like I said, I've got a video specifically talking about them in relation to how and when you're going to be able to actually sell them effectively. So recommend checking that out. But one thing to just point out just ever so quickly, I'm not entirely sure how clear this is going to show up on the screen. But if you want to get a single item, so say the helm, for example, if you want to get that all the way to rank 4, with my estimations, based on these prices, you're looking at close to 185,000 gold just to get this one pattern to rank 4. So yeah, this is why it's going to get pretty expensive, but hopefully, of course, you can craft these items and then eventually sell them and recuperate a lot of your cost that way. At least good luck with that. It's going to get quite costly. So that's pretty much all we need to talk about when it comes to crafting things. How are we going to go about selling blacksmithing stuff? Well, I've made the selling a little bit easy for you as well. I've actually gone as far as to put together some TSM groups for all of the items that are available within blacksmithing. So I've just put everything in some simple groups. There's no operations attached to this. So if you want to utilize this, you're going to have to look at deciding exactly how you want to set your operations up. But the base groups are there. Every single item that you can craft is in these TSM groups. And once again, I'll leave this in a paste bin down below. You can see all of the ceremonious gear, you can see all the shadow steel breastplates, even the items that are locked behind reputation. I've made sure these are in that TSM group. This will be linked in a paste bin down below. In other terms, selling blacksmithing items, it's really a case of deciding whether you want to use your crafter's mark to adjust the item level. If you see a gap in your market to do that, I'd highly recommend it. It's going to be worth your while. Yeah, my final thoughts on blacksmithing then for you guys. That's about as deep as I can get into the profession for now. Final thoughts. Yeah, it's kind of expensive to level. Be prepared that if you want to get your blacksmithing up to level 100 quick, it's going to cost you a fair amount. The amount of materials used were pretty steep. It was nearly, I'd say, about half a stack of each of the zone specific ore, and an entire stack, maybe 2 stacks of lacerite ore, and probably close to 4,000 or 5,000 gold just in vendor materials. But if you follow my Shadowlands cheat sheet, there's a 1 to 100 guide in there, which I'll do my very best, obviously, to keep up to date if anything does change. So utilize that guide and it will hopefully be a smoother process for you. Pairing blacksmith, it goes very well with jewel crafting for the fact that jewel crafters also need these Shadowgast ingots to craft their base legendary items. So pairing it with jewel crafting, there's a nice synergy there. Also, if you want to be totally self-sufficient, you're going to need yourself an enchanter so that you can make these enchanted Alethium bars. And of course, if you're really trying to keep the costs down and are willing to spend some time farming, pick up a miner, mine up some of the materials yourself. That's really going to ease that initial cost. But be prepared that if you want to craft base legendary items at a competitive rate, you're probably still going to need to buy a lot of ore off the auction house. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for blacksmithing, guys. I'm pretty excited. Blacksmithing is going to be on my alt. It's not going to be on my main. So when the game finally does come out, I might be a little bit slower to the mark than some people getting it fully up and ready. But the way that it looks as it is now, it looks like a very strong profession going into Shadowlands, and I highly expect you to be able to make a lot of gold with it. So then, guys, if this video was useful to you, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. If you're new around here, which about 70% of the people watching my videos right now aren't subscribed, so if you are new around here and enjoyed it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And to give you guys a bit of a heads up, we do also live stream here 5 days a week, Monday through till Friday. So if you want to see my research and preparation and planning for Shadowlands, hop along, say hi. It'd be great to have you. But then, guys, enjoy that. I'll see you next time. Peace.